Today we have Daniel Schulof, who is a writer, activist, and pet food entrepreneur. We discuss his journey from practicing law to entering the pet food industry. He shares his passion for improving the lives of pets and educating pet owners about the importance of low carb diets. Daniel founded the Keto Natural Pet Foods, a company that offers low carb dog food, and the Pet Food Consumer Rights Council, an advocacy group for pet owners. He emphasizes the need for accurate information and transparency in the pet food industry, and Daniel's goal is to make a positive impact on the lives of pets and their owners. Look, if you are enjoying this content, please do give it a thumbs up. I really would appreciate that. If you could also hit the subscribe button, it makes such a difference to the algorithm, and I would personally super appreciate you hitting that subscribe button. But if you've got any thoughts about the episode, or you've got any people that you would like me to interview, please do leave it in the comments down there below. But thank you so much for joining me today, and hopefully you enjoy the interview. Today we have Daniel Schulof, who is a writer, activist, and pet food entrepreneur. Hello, Daniel. How are you today?
Hi, Mark. I'm fine. Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. This is going to be an interesting one for me because it's in an area I don't think I've ever had anyone within the pet food industry, and I love dogs. Absolutely love dogs. I've got a miniature schnauzer who is a massive part of my family, so I'm really excited to hear about some of the things that you're doing within the pet world as well. So welcome so much.
Thank you. Yeah, it's nice to be here. We have in the United States, at least, more than half of our citizens are dog or cat owners. And
Wow.
so I wager that a great chunk of your listeners
Yeah.
are, of course, pet owners as well. And often the stuff that I have learned over the past 10 years of writing about and working within the industry is not common knowledge stuff. So there's plenty to talk about in terms of how what my personal development, my career development has looked like, and how that might be interesting to others. But within the pet industry itself, obviously, there's tons of stuff there that floats under the surface that I'm happy to help as much as I can with helping people understand.
So
In the
we're going to
US,
talk. We're going to talk about your book and where that came from, and also I do have prepared questions about the actual industry and about specifically to do with dog food and cholesterol. And if we get time for that, then we will cover that because I think that's really, really interesting. As a dog owner myself, it's going to be really, really interesting. But the podcast is called The Absolute Business Mindset. What does a business mindset mean to you?
I think one of the ways that I differentiate a business mindset from the type of mindset that I think I bring to my life when I'm on autopilot, or that folks who aren't operating a business capacity often bring to their life, is a differentiation between having ultimate responsibility and not. So as an entrepreneur, and I get that business mindset applies more broadly to that, but in the world of the entrepreneur, the organization that I run is there. The buck stops with there's an expression in the United States, the buck stops here.
Yeah.
And that is, I feel like I develop a deeper appreciation for the extent to which that's true every day. How there's no explanation for why something went wrong, or why something is proving challenging really means much of anything. It's, at the end of the day, you're responsible for everything. You're making the right decisions. You can't claim, or the wrong decisions. You can't claim that something didn't go your way, and so it's not your fault and somebody should give you a pass for it. It's ultimately, it comes down to you, and you have to live or die by the own decisions that you make. And that's different than how I used to at least operate, at least some of the time before I founded my own business. Working in a larger organization where I wasn't at the top of the totem pole lends itself to a certain kind of approach to responsibility, where I'm responsible unless it's in somebody else's domain. And
Yeah.
then another way that I can get out of any situation is to highlight, well, that was they messed that up. It's not my fault. I didn't mess that up. And that doesn't exist in the world of the entrepreneur. It doesn't matter. There is no room for that. And so that's a very different thing. And it's a lot like, in my judgment, at least, it's a lot like pet ownership. Sometimes things go wrong in my care for my parenting of my dogs. And when that happens, when I have something bad happen there, I can feel myself tempted to use an excuse or an explanation and say, well, I didn't do anything wrong here. This was somebody else did something wrong, and the bad outcome that resulted has to do with them, not me. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I'm responsible for them, and that responsibility the excuse might make me feel better in the moment, but at the end of the day, it doesn't change anything for the nature of what really matters to me, which is how things are going for the animal. And so that kind of final responsibility is central to how I think about a business mindset, I would say.
I love that idea. Ultimate responsibility. As an entrepreneur, that is what you have. It's your business. You're making the decisions, good or bad. It really is. It is down to you to make those decisions, as I say. And it's very similar to dog ownership and having children as well. Children is exactly the same as that. You have ultimate responsibility when they're young, especially when they're babies, because they can't tell you. And it's the same with dogs and cats. They can't tell you when they're ill, or they can't tell you. But yeah, I really love that. That's been one of the best answers that I've had, that idea of ultimate responsibility for.
Oh, we're off to a good start then.
Yeah,
It's just so different from, like, when I encounter people whose work lives don't involve that degree of ultimate responsibility. You can tell right away when you start talking about work and professional stuff with them. I feel like you can tell right away. It's a very different thing when we've had the opportunity over the years, numerous times, for folks to come into our organization who previously hadn't been in a place where they own the outcome. They own shares in the company, and the upside is theirs, but the downside is theirs too. And it takes time, and some don't ever develop it. The shift in mindset from being like, I need to protect my own reputation, and as long as any downside can be explained away as being the consequence of somebody else who's going to catch the blame, that getting away from that as a tendency is so hard. It's so different than what you're kind of conditioned to do working in a corporate world, you know?
Yeah, so I worked corporate for 12 years, and managing people and managing situations is very different to owning it. And I think that's what you're saying there. And I totally get that. I used to work with people who had been quite senior managers, but they always had that safety net of a partner or someone above them to sort of sound ideas off. Now, if it's your business and it's only you, there sometimes isn't as many people to sound things out with and that's why I actually, as an entrepreneur, have tried to surround myself with really good people that I can sort of bounce ideas off. It's still my decision. They're not going to tell me necessarily whether it's a right or wrong decision if it's a coach, for example, but yeah, I try and surround myself with people that I can trust, that can give me an honest view on things. And I think that is really, really important, that sort of community. And a lot of entrepreneurs sometimes get quite isolated and quite on their own. And for me, it's super important to have people around me that I can trust to bounce ideas off or sound things off, just to get that sort of second opinion, because it can be very lonely. They say lonely at the top, but it can be very lonely running a team or running a business with other employees, especially as solopreneurs. It's the same and it's slightly different. But yeah, no, great answer. Absolutely love that. So you initially started doing a degree in law. So first question is, what did you aspire to be when you were doing your law degree?
Well, so I not only obtained a degree in law, I practiced law for 6 years in the United States in the city of Atlanta. And so when I made the decision to go to law school, and when I practiced law for the better part of a decade, for the majority of that time, I was not a pet owner, and I certainly did not see my future as being in pet food at any point. I kind of developed a change in perspective where that started to feel like a possibility maybe 2 years before I ultimately left that career. But for the majority of it, I envisioned a future in which I would grow increasingly successful as a lawyer. And I would do that for the remainder of my professional life. The type of law that I practiced is litigation. And so that's like you're in the UK, barrister. And I worked on the commercial side, so not on the public side. I worked for a big international law firm that represented primarily business clients in disputes with one another. They'd get in some kind of legal fight and avail themselves of the judicial system, and we would represent them in trying to get a good outcome in that forum for them over their dispute. And I think that I went into it because I saw it as a good fit for my personality attributes. And I think that
what were they? What did you see your attributes to be?
Well, I think it depends how charitable you're trying to be. I think that if you were trying to put a very rosy perspective on it, you might say I'm very intellectually rigorous. And if you were perhaps being less charitable, you might say that I'm overly critical. That there's I can be I want to win every argument that I'm in. I don't like being wrong. And arguing with people is something that has been a part of my life in one degree or another since I was much younger. And I had enough people tell me as I was growing up that you would be good at doing this for a living. And so it felt like a natural fit. And
Are you big into sports?
well, I play sports, but they're kind of self-competitive ones. They're not team sports. The sports that I do recreationally are things in like the mountains. I do rock climbing and skiing and mountaineering. It's like I go up mountains and go ski down them. And it's physical, of course.
Yeah.
And there's a competitive sort of quality to it, which is like an achievement-based thing. I want to do this new route, or I want to climb this new mountain. But it's not the same kind of winners and losers mentality.
Well, that was why I was going to ask you, because so for a long time, even in my corporate career, I always thought, because I love sport, I love the competition, and I always thought there was winners and losers. And it sounded like what you were saying, that the way the litigation and you as a lawyer, a barrister, was that it was about winning and losing. It wasn't till I really started my self-development journey and my personal development journey and my business development in reading and listening to podcasts that I realized that there was this wonderful thing called a win-win situation where both parties are successful in one situation. And for a long time, I thought that was impossible. I thought you had to have winners and losers. Did you struggle with that when you were transitioning your career, or even in your career as a lawyer?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think that the way that my mindset has been oriented is a little bit different, which is that I've always identified with having like an allergic reaction to being wrong. For other people looking at me and being like, that guy is wrong about this. I don't necessarily want to win, but I want to be on the right side of anything that I'm on. And I hate the feeling of somebody else being right about me, having a perspective, somebody else being right about it, and everybody else knowing that I'm on the wrong side of it. I hate that feeling. And so it's somewhat like winning and losing, I suppose, but it's not exactly analogous to it. And so for that reason, it's like it squares itself. It maybe lends itself a little bit more to the whatever the absence of a zero-sum situation is, the win-win situation, than does a pure competitive one. That said, there are plenty of times if I'm being honest, when my primary emotional motivation for doing work, one of the things that produces the most work for me, the most energetic and enjoyable work for me, is the feeling of like righteous indignation that I get when if I feel like somebody else is doing something that they're wrong and they know it and they're taking advantage, somebody else is being hurt by it, I get a tremendous amount of like fire around that to make sure that I correct the record on that. And that has a little bit more of a winners and losers mentality. But
so
yeah,
being on the right side of the law, being on the right side of decisions, being on the right side of choices is important to you.
yeah. And in the law, you know, you can't always guarantee that your client is in a place where you can get where you're there, where like you might be hired by someone. And if you're not ultimately responsible for your law organization, you might be put in a place where you do have to represent, because somebody else chose this, for you to represent a client that you think is wrong. And you've got to make your job is to make the best argument that you can on behalf of that client. And that has certainly happened. I've certainly done it. It feels, the experience of doing that, and I think the successfulness that you can achieve if you're operating in that world is so different from what if you can get to a place where you're like, I genuinely, authentically believe that I'm on the right side of this issue. Not only is the quality of work so much more enjoyable, and like that's some, you know, I achieve a kind of enjoyment out of that, but also you can be so much more successful. I believe that the audience that's listening, that's making decisions about who's right and who's wrong, has a kind of intuitive ability to I believe human beings are really good at that, at being able to tell authentically, this person believes in this, this person doesn't, and that you've got a good compass for that. And so it's a very, if you can develop that as a professional skill, learning when you authentically believe in the point that you're trying to make and when you don't, and making sure that you're only trying to make points that you do authentically believe in, I think is a hugely beneficial thing when it comes to persuasive communication.
Amazing. So what made you transition away from law into the pet world?
I got a dog is the most fundamental answer. I was working as a lawyer at this big organization in a city and working too much. Basically, they grind you when you're a relatively junior person at the place where I was working. You have to work a great deal, and it's somewhat of a lonely existence. You know, you're spending more time in the office than you'd like. And I was a single guy at the time. I got my first dog, and it had a very big positive impact on my life. He became my best friend, and I became very interested in taking care of him and giving him the kind of life that I thought he deserved, and, you know, exploring what it meant to be responsible for this guy. I cared so much about him that I wanted to make sure that I gave him the best life that I could. And over the course of doing that, I kind of like learned things that led me to think that there was like a professional life for me that was possible there, basically.
So you set up Varsity Pets, is that right? That was the first business that you set up.
Yes, that's right. So like while I was working as a lawyer, I set up what we would now call, it wasn't in the jargon at the time, but what we now call like a side hustle, like a business that didn't have any investors and was never designed to, it never aspired to be large enough that it would take over the world. But that it was something that was designed to be mostly passive, that like once I did the work on it, it would run relatively well on an automated way, where I wouldn't have to be spending hours and hours a day making sure that it was going exactly right in order for it to spit out some money on the back end of it. It was something that was like highly automated, where if I could build it up, set it, and forget it. And so
it was grooming. Was it grooming initially that you got?
We made toys. We made dog toys.
Okay.
And so, you know, the dog that I got was a Rottweiler, big, intense, serious dog. And the kind of dog where you need to give it exercise every day in order to help manage its kind of neurotic behavior and like keep it a polite member of society. And we basically knocked off an existing product. I found this product that was so great for him that I had never heard of. I just stumbled upon it and I was like, how did I have never heard of this thing? And what it was just a large sphere, larger than a football, like a not American football, but a soccer ball, like about maybe 12 inches across, hard plastic. So not something that you could kick with your toe. If you kicked it with an open-toed shoe, you like put your foot. And the kinds of dogs that were like mine had a kind of neurosis where they couldn't, it was too large for them to get their jaws around. It's too hard for them to break. It moves when they bump into it. And so basically you could put it down in a expanse in a yard on a pitch, and they would wrestle it and herd it and kind of interact with it in a very physical way to exhaustion without any like input from me. So I could check email or drink coffee while the dog is out there exercising itself. And it was so great for this dog that needed exercise every day. And basically I was like, oh my gosh, these things would be so easy to make. And I bet we could do it. And I just figured out how to, you know, over the course of about a year, found a plastics manufacturer that could do it. I had enough money that I could start selling them basically over the internet. This was in the very early days of the internet economy, where the like direct to consumer commerce was becoming a thing. And I was like, you know, work with the warehouse where we'd advertise over primary like internet-based channels. Folks would come to the website, purchase this product. It's a niche product, good for very limited, but very good fit for the dogs that it's a good fit for. And we'd have something. And yeah, we did. We got it. I got it up and running well enough that I could eventually had enough income. I certainly wasn't ever going to get rich from it, but I was getting enough money out of it that if I left my job as a lawyer, I'd be able to pay my bills just off of the money that was coming out of that.
And what was your dog called?
My dog's name, which I cannot take credit for, was Cody. And the reason that he was named Cody was there's a type of grizzly bear that is the Kodiak bear. Is a very large grizzly bear. They have, I'm up in Canada now, they have them around here, I guess. And as a puppy, he looked like a bear cub. We got him when he was 8 weeks old. And this little dock tail that Rottweilers have is kind of like a bear's. Little bears, you know, have these short little ball tails. It looked like that. So Cody is short for Kodiak. That was his name. Amazing. He's passed on now. It's been a long time since that, but yeah, that he was a good dog and very much changed my life. Like I said, we called it Varsity Pets because the consumer facing brand was like athletics. Like the pitch was, you can exercise your dog without you having to do anything. And so the athletics was part of what's baked into it. And varsity, do you guys use that expression in the UK?
Yeah. Like so yeah, we do use a similar definition of it. And how did Cody change your life?
I think that well, in a million ways, ultimately. I mean, like the change he had on my professional life is probably the most obvious thing, is that like, had I never gotten him, I would not be anywhere involved with pet food today. Have never done anything involving pets. But I probably would not have changed careers at all. I'd probably still be working as a lawyer. I didn't not enjoy it at the risk of whatever double negative there. I enjoyed it. Like there was a lot about it that was a good fit for me personally. And you work with really smart people. There's a quality about the work that I did that I ended up using to make the decision to leave, which is that in my line of work, representing business clients in disputes, it's not like we just represented one kind of business. Like whatever company became a client, they're inevitably getting in a dispute about whatever they specifically do, how they make their money. And so you've got to represent them in disputes over that material. And so you've got to learn and become truly expert in whatever stuff they do. And so we represented, you know, voice over IP company. I know nothing about like internet communications. And you have to learn that at a level where you understand it as well as anybody at the organization. You can explain it to the court. You can highlight when somebody says something wrong with it. Represented aerospace companies. Lockheed Martin is big US aerospace company, about a aircraft that hasn't flown since World War II. And it's like, you have to learn. I don't know nothing about airplanes, but you develop this ability to learn how to learn, basically. And of course, of doing that, you develop a kind of hubris, a kind of like intellectual confidence that like, if somebody gives me if there's a body of knowledge here I know what it will look like to become an expert in it. I know how it will feel to be able to complete the circle and understand all the sides of this issue. And that's what gave me kind of the confidence to leave my law career and start working on pet stuff directly.
Right.
Because while after I got this like dog toy company set up and it was spitting out some passive income enough that I could do something other than practice law, I like was also becoming interested in the scientific side of how to exercise and care for this dog. Like the reasons I was exercising him started off as like, I want him to not bite anybody and I want him to be polite. But it became clear to me soon thereafter that like there are a lot of other reasons you might want to exercise your dog. And one of them is that obesity, the problem of obesity is colossal among pets in the Western world. And I had no idea about that at the time that I was becoming interested in exercising my dog. I knew, of course, generally speaking, that being fat isn't particularly good for you, but I had no sense of how common it is among dogs, nor did I have any sense about how deadly it is, how it's so linked with every chronic disease that makes dogs sick in the Western world has links to obesity. And nevertheless, more than half of the dogs in the United States suffer from this problem. And so I learned that stuff and I kind of couldn't make sense of it. Like I cared so much about, I was like experiencing the emotions about this dog. I cared so much for this dog.
Yeah.
And like, I had never heard of that. I thought of myself as a smart and well-informed person. And it came as a surprise to me. And I was like, if this is happening to me, if I'm feeling this level of surprise about this issue, so many other people are surprised about it too. How can this be happening? How can there be that half of the dog owners in the country are essentially letting their dogs smoke a pack of cigarettes every day? That's about how bad obesity is for them. Smoking cigarettes every day for the entire life of your dog. How could that be? And trying to answer that question became something I became very motivated to do. And that's what really led me to leave my career as a lawyer and write a book about that subject.
Yeah, we'll come into the book's called Dogs, Dog Food and Dogma, but just on that overweight, I'm imagining there is a huge correlation between the obesity problem that's in Western world and the obesity problem in Western world dogs as well, that people are walking them less because of a more sedentary lifestyle, and therefore the humans are getting fatter and equally the dogs are getting fatter. Have you found any sort of exact correlation between the two?
Yeah, so no one to my knowledge has done the study where it's like, is your body composition likely to be correlated with your dog's body composition? But that is not, I wouldn't bet against that as being an accurate thing. I don't think anybody's actually done that study, but the two have certainly marched on a population level in tandem. As rates of obesity among people have rose, so have those rates among dogs and cats. And so folks have thrown out all sorts of types of explanations in an effort to try to combat this as a problem. And of course, one of them places a lot of the blame, like you did there, on lack of exercise, that we're leading increasingly sedentary lives, and so our pets are doing the same, which is, in my judgment, part of the problem. I do believe that is something to do with it. However, I would also note that there are some things out there that suggest to me that maybe that's not the whole explanation. For instance, obesity is just as common among cats as it is among dogs. It's no less common. You see obesity in very few species in the wild. It's essentially non-existent phenomenon. It's what we call a disease of civilization, that humans and pets are kind of the only species that ever gotten obese on like epidemic population type levels.
Right.
Cats, unlike dogs, daily exercise is a part of their life, but it's like there's no targeted daily exercise. There's no like, I got to go take my cat for a walk thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think, to me, that at least suggests like maybe there's more to the story than just that. And I think that is the case. That's certainly the case I try to make in my book, that some specific dietary things that are very common among pets in the Western world are the laboring ore. They're the fundamental problem, that these things that you're highlighting influence it as well. But that if we had the dietary issue buttoned up and solved, that this wouldn't be a population level problem for them.
So you set up Keto Natural Pet Foods. And before we go into tell me first of all, what's the USP? What's the unique selling point for your dog food?
Yeah, it's as the keto prefix probably indicates to your listeners, it's a very low carb dog food, which is surprisingly, even shockingly uncommon in the world of pet food. In the United States, at least, the regulatory system doesn't require pet food brands to tell consumers how much carbohydrate is in there. And so like the vast majority of brands essentially mislead consumers with how they label and describe their products. And they mislead them in the way that makes them suggest that the product is a far lower carbohydrate content, far higher meat content than it really is. And so amazing. I mean, I founded the company in 2017. So we're going on 6 years now. At the time I founded it, the word keto, the prefix keto diet meant something to some people. It was not a ubiquitous thing where there's keto ice cream and keto tortillas and keto chips and bread and everything else like that. It didn't really exist like that yet. But now it obviously does. You can find whatever. If you're a keto person, you can find a food product in whatever it is, frozen pizza to soda, that's the product for you. In the doggy world, that's not the case. In the US, it's like us and one other brand are like low carb dog food brands. Every one of the brands that's popular in the United States is like very gently suggesting, of course we're low carb. There's a wolf on the bag and there's a steak on the bag, and the first ingredient is meat. And so the consumer that's not looking at it too carefully would be forgiven for thinking that it is. Reality, it's not. And so that's what makes us very different, was we make truly low carb dog food.
And what's the science behind? It sounds like there's been research into it to say that carbs are damaging to our pets. What's the science behind it?
Yeah, so there are a few things, but the most fundamental one, and the one that I explore at the most length in my book is fundamentally about the problem of obesity. And in my judgment, the scientific evidence is rock solid that were it not for dietary carbohydrates, you would not have an obesity problem whatsoever among pets in the Western world. Carbohydrate is the backbone of the Western world's pet food system. It's like the fundamental thing. In the vast majority of products, it's the most common nutrient. So more than half of the product is carbohydrate. And there's an abundance of evidence that shows that basically that's exactly what makes dogs and cats get fat. The same study that's very hard to do in human beings is really easy to do in companion animals. That can test the idea of whether carbohydrate is the fundamental cause of obesity really well. So like the way, if you're out there trying to figure out whether carbs make you fat or whether all calories are created equal, the kind of study you want to do is pretty straightforward. It's just hard to do in people, which is that like you feed two different groups exactly the same number of calories, but different amount of carbohydrate, and see if their bodies end up different. Right? Because if all calories are created equal, they should end up exactly the same. Nothing should be different, assuming you hold everything steady. But it's very hard to do with people because people eat all kinds of different things every day, and they don't sign up to be held in metabolic wards for a period long enough to watch their bodies change in size. And so you see a great deal in the human world of debate over whether carbs make you fat or not. And a big part of the reason why you see so much debate is that kind of work, scientific work, is hard to do. And so it's not really done very well. But in the dog and cat world, it's super easy. It's like there are lots of animals that are housed in laboratory conditions. They eat one thing every day anyway. You can tell exactly how many calories they're eating every day, and it's really easy to do. And so as a result, it's been done a half dozen times. And every single time that it's done, the same happens. You do the same study every single time. You take one group of dogs, give them the same number of calories as another group, but different amount of carbohydrate. And the dogs that eat more carbohydrate get fat. The dogs that eat less carbohydrate don't get fat. Every single time it's happened, that's exactly what happens. And over time, scientists have also worked out at a biochemical level why that is so. Like how, okay, what happens there that at the level that makes the animal get fat. So they understand that too. And so obesity is a big part of the reason why you'd want to feed your dog less carbohydrate.
Do you cut carbs yourself? Is that something that you do in your diet?
I believe it's healthy. I believe it's healthy for me. I also believe that carbs are pretty delicious. And I'm like, I alluded to this a minute ago, but like recreationally, I engage in hobbies that are like very, very physically active. And so I do a lot of daily exercise because of what I do recreationally. And so I've got more wiggle room than the average bear when it comes to that stuff. So I believe it's healthy. And if I weren't so active, I'd be more rigorous about it. I am not myself somebody that eats almost zero carbohydrate.
Okay.
But that's only because of my lifestyle supports that. And
Okay.
if my dog, yeah. So
And you describe yourself as an activist for the pet industry. What for you is the definition of being an activist?
yeah, so I actually slight difference. I think of myself at least as an activist for pet food consumers, sort of on the other side of being an activist for industry. I believe that it's a very, very difficult thing to be a conscientious and well-informed pet food consumer. That if you are motivated to be responsible for your dog or cat that you love, you are faced with real difficulties in making good decisions. There's a lot of misinformation. There's very powerful and well-funded organizations, firms that are motivated to not tell you the truth about things that are consequential in your life. And it's very hard to know who to trust. And basically the types of things that would help improve that environment, there aren't a great deal of folks taking that up as a cause. There aren't a great deal of people who are like, my thing is going to be improving the regulatory environment in which pet food is sold, or improving the scientific record, making sure that pet owners are more familiar with the true, accurate scientific record. And so in a lot of ways, I have tried to, since I've left my law profession and have been a pet food person, that's been sort of the guiding principle for me and it's what I'm doing, making it better and easier to be a thoughtful, conscientious pet owner or not. And so what activist in my particular case means is writing a book about a subject that I believe is hugely important, but is not explored. At the time I wrote my book, there were already like the books that would come to form the intellectual backbone for like low carb science in the human domain. There are like a lot of them. There are not as many as there are now. But you could find keto cookbooks and keto pop science books that would look at the history of nutritional science on this topic and how it developed into what it is and teach. None in the doggy world. There's just nobody else that ever told that story at all. And that's a big part of why I got so motivated to take that. Like the book for me started out as something for my personal use. I was like, oh, how am I going to take care of my own dog better? I kept notes, a collection of like analysis of the scientific record. But as the deeper I got into it, the more I realized like there was a hole in the public's understanding of this topic, that nobody else had done this topic. And it was like, well, why is that? And trying to explain that like led me further and further down the rabbit hole. So explaining that kind of stuff and helping folks be better pet owners is sort of the like what I would describe in conceptual terms as what it means to be an activist in this case to me. What it means in my particular case, the things I have done that represent activism are a few. One, I wrote the book, and I still try to do as many media things as I can to talk to people about this kind of stuff. Number two is I founded a nonprofit organization that's kind of the first of its kind that is designed, it's called the Pet Food Consumer Rights Council. And what it is an advocacy group for pet owners. It's like there are all kinds of wonderful nonprofit organizations devoted to animal welfare, but they kind of tackle it from the perspective of we're going to do something that's going to make life better for these animals. We're going to protect their habitat, or we're going to get them off the streets or whatever. And they do great things. But there's this whole other group that's like animals that are we're caring for in our homes. They all have loving human guardians. They have budgets. These people have budgets, and yet they're incredibly sick. Like
Yeah.
more than half in the country have obesity. So advocating for those people is a part of what we do as well. And I've been involved, I've used my legal background too, is I've been a plaintiff in a number of lawsuits that essentially look to correct problematic practices that big pet food companies are engaged in that hurt consumers.
And what's the support from the vet industry? Have you found that that the vets are sort of promoting your foods? Have you got into relationships and business relationships with the vet industry?
So on an individual level, yes. On a population level, no. There's like a big part of the story of the book is how one particular pet food company in the United States, at least, these things do operate somewhat differently on a continental basis. And so my book is really focused on the US pet food market and pet owners in the United States. But within that world, this company called Hill's Pet Nutrition, who
Yeah.
I view as like a particularly egregious offender of kind of like they've played a big role in making the pet food industry such a bad place right now. One of the things they've done is with great success kind of co-opted the veterinary community. They have, through a variety of different channels, really come to influence what it means to be a veterinarian from the time you're in school all the way up to the time you leave your career. They literally provide the professors that teach veterinary nutrition at vet schools. They literally write the textbooks that are used by students in veterinary schools. They literally go around and educate practicing vets on what is supposedly accurate nutritional science. And they have a 30, 40-year head start on those of us who are trying to change that system. And so I would be lying if I said that they're not still winning in that exercise. However, what they have a head start in, we have an advantage as well, which is that we're right about the science. We're unquestionably right. And so veterinarians, unlike some consumers, are more willing to engage with this kind of sophisticated scientific argumentation that you need to make in order to overturn scientific paradigms. And so like it's speaking to a judge and speaking to a graduate degree holding veterinarian are not too different. Those are very educated people who understand sophisticated arguments and technical arguments. And so we have the truth. The scientific record is in our favor. And so on an individual basis, the number of veterinarians who are supportive of our perspective on some key substantive matters grows every day. But we're still far from the mainstream perspective, I would say, in the veterinary community.
Right, fantastic. Look, I asked the same 6 questions for all of my guests. They're quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. The first one is, what's the best decision that you've made?
In my entire life, professional
Yeah,
life?
whatever. Yeah.
I think that the best decision that I ever made was I'll confine it to the professional world, and I will say that the decision to leave my law practice was the best decision I ever made. Second, perhaps only, or what would be second, I suppose, would be the decision to go to law school. Even though those things seem paradoxically opposed, but they're not, because I use my legal education every day a lot in what I do for work now. But leaving the environment of being a lawyer for hire at a big law firm and getting into the work that I've gotten into subsequently, this pet stuff, being an activist is about the best term I can come up with, has been the best decision. It's more rewarding. It's been, I feel like I'm making a better difference in the world. I enjoy the work more. I enjoy the responsibility more. There's no way you can, I can't think of a way to think about work that doesn't like makes it it's not a worse decision in any way. It took time to where it is now, but it's unquestionably that like making that jump, which required some amount of bravery, was the biggest thing.
What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
I think that the best piece of advice I've been given is that you don't have to please all, like, don't aim for as many people as possible. That if you're right, like a lot of people will tell you in my line of work, you need to dumb down the argument and make it to make it more accessible to a bigger group of people. What you're trying to say here, it might be right and it might be impactful, but it only applies to a small number of people. Not everybody's going to be with you on this. I always felt like that was very bad advice. And the people that have encouraged me to stick to a high standard of rigor in the book that I'm working on, a high level of sophistication in the way that we explain the value of and sell our products, have really shaped that's proven time and time again to be the right decision. And it's uncommon when you hear people say that, like, don't cater to the masses, like focus on getting it exactly right, even if some people won't stay with you. That's valuable advice, and I give that advice to other people all the time.
Amazing. Who helped you most in your career or your business?
Well, I think professionally, the one thing that sticks out to me is there's a very well-known American human nutritional science writer, who's, at the time I started on my book, I viewed as a hero figure. And over the course of writing my book, I got to know personally, and he encouraged the work that I was doing. He validated the work that I was doing in a way that was very valuable for me. His name is Gary Taubes. He is in a lot of ways the like intellectual grandfather of the human nutritional science low carb community. He's just this like uber science writer who's wrote these big fat tomes about this subject. And I just revered him as a hero when I started, and then got to know, over the course of the book, crossed paths with him, got to know him. He began looking at some of my work. He was very encouraging about it, and it made a huge difference. Writing a book, we talked about how lonely entrepreneurship can be. Well, let me tell you, writing your first book when you're all on your own and haven't sold it to a publisher is lonely, and you will question your own competency a lot over the course of doing that. And so having someone who I respected so much, whose intellect I like valued so much, be positive and encouraging and validating, helped me see that project through. It was a 4-year project for me. And so like, there were a lot of times to abandon ship and go back to being a lawyer. And he really helped me. I'm hugely grateful, forever grateful that he was so encouraging.
Amazing. Tell me about a regret that you have.
I don't feel a lot of regret, which is not to say that I haven't made a ton of mistakes, but I just kind of don't think of them in a way that makes me feel regretful. I mean, I can think of decisions in my personal life that I regret. I'm not going to go there
Okay.
on this. They're just a little too personal. In my business life, I mean, maybe I would say it took me too long to work up the courage to make the change. I guess that's a little bit of a cop out, because I know I highlighted that quality of making a change in my career is so impactful for me. But like, the reality is, it was hard for me to work up the courage to make that change, to like get to a place where I could say, all right, I'm going to leave this very lucrative job to do something that's not paying me anything. And it was hard. It took time. And if I had done it 2 years earlier, I'd be in a better place right now. And it took me that long, to kind of get there.
Okay.
I'd say
Fair
I
enough.
regret that. I think I regret not being, it took me time in my life to become a very motivated, serious professional. And as a student, I enjoyed law school, but it was not a full-time concern for me. I was very much a young person first and a professional second. And so I sort of regret that. I'm not sure I see the value in having been such a young moron for so long. But it's hard. There's no shortage of people advising me to do differently. I just kind of,
I was a little bit the same at university. I enjoyed the discussions, the socializing, being with other people from different backgrounds, different experiences, and having those types of experiences with people. And I regret that. I wish I'd put more into my degree as well. What are you most proud of?
I think I'm proud of having made the decision to leave. Like, it's just rare. Everybody I talk to that is a personal friend, that I encounter in my personal life, who's still a part of a major organization where they're kind of a cog in the wheel and they feel in debt. They need to keep doing it because they don't want to take so many steps back in their career by leaving their job and starting from square one. Basically everybody that feels that way has like, I really should leave to go do this. I want to do this, but I can't quite work up the courage to do it. And yeah, just pulling that Band-Aid off, I feel proud of, because it was so impactful and so difficult to do. The thing that we've built, honestly, is just like, it was a market hole. It was obvious to anyone who knew the scientific record, there should be product. There are people out there that'll buy this product. And so I think we've done a great job. I stand behind, I literally feed our, I make a lot of effort to be in a lot of media because I'm proud of what we do. And I like it being associated with my name. I'm not somebody that's like at all trying to disconnect my personhood from my company. It is my company and I'm proud of it. But I'm more proud of like taking that leap when there was no net really. And yeah, it was just very hard to do. Very hard to do.
Amazing. What does legacy mean to you?
Well, I guess that I feel at a hormonal level the pleasant feeling of knowing that something I did, someone else views as having made their life better. Like I do, that is, I mentioned before the righteous indignation that I also feel at a hormonal level towards, you're a bad person. I'm going to hold you accountable. But the feeling of somebody being like, oh my God, I needed a product like this. I had no idea it existed. You're doing this. My dog has diabetes. It's so much easier to manage because of you. Thank you. That is a very positive feeling too. And I guess legacy is, to me, is sort of like the extent to which people feel that even after you're gone. Like I like the feeling and I get that I'm not going to be here all the time. And I still want to do things that will make people have that feeling still feels attractive. And I guess that feels like legacy. It's like a kind of irrational thing, but I want it. Like I want to be remembered, I guess. Still.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. And lastly, if people want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
I'm at Daniel Schulof on Twitter, which is about the only social media that I do anything with. But if you'd like to find where I exert my professional efforts, Keto Natural Pet Foods.com. Our company is called Keto Natural Pet Foods. KetoNaturalPetFoods.com is our website where you can get introduced to everything that we do and follow us down whatever rabbit hole. And Pet Food Consumer Rights Council.org is the website for the nonprofit that I founded. Or you could find, like you said, my book. Those are all three pretty good ways. All those are better than keeping up with me on social media, which I'm not I'm of the wrong generation, I like to say, but the reality is I'm just bad at it. And so it's not.
No, that's great. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolutely inspiring to hear you. And I'm going to be doing some research now for my dog. My dog has a bit of cholesterol problems, so I'm going to research your pet food. And I don't know if you ship to the UK, do you?
We don't, unfortunately. And it's because the regulatory world is so different. It's not, we have to be very different in terms of how we package, label our products in order to do that. And we're just not large enough yet to do it. But you can learn a lot of things and you can find I can help you find what would be the best product for your perspective on what health means for your dog, and you know how to find me. So
that's lovely. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you.
Likewise, thank you for having me.
I really hope you've enjoyed that content. It's a really fascinating interview that I've done there. So please do, if you are enjoying this content, please do give it a like. Please do give a subscribe. It'd be really good to boost the subscriptions. It really makes a difference to the algorithm in YouTube. So thank you for that. If you do hit subscribe, hit the bell icon and you'll get all of the content. You'll get notified when all the content is available. Thank you so much for your time. It's really appreciated. Thanks a lot.